Operational.
Chair Van Brocklin, we are now live.
Thank you. Welcome everyone to the December 15th, 2020 meeting of the Oregon Transportation Commission. Tonight's session, as you know, is focused entirely on the 2024-2027 STIP allocation, which is a step in the STIP process. We won't actually go through and approve the final 24-27 STIP until late 2022, early 2023, I think. So many steps ahead, but this is obviously one that there's a lot of focused attention on, including by the five of us. So what we'll be doing tonight is we'll begin by taking public testimony, and then when we've completed that, we will hear a staff report, and then we will the commission will deliberate. So let me, what I'd like to do first is make sure everyone knows this is a closed caption facilitated meeting that we offer closed captioning, and you can manage the font and the features of that individually. So I wanted to bring everyone's attention to that. I also want to thank everyone who has commented on the 24-27 STIP. We've had a lot of good comment. We've had a lot of comments, a lot of good comments, and been doing that for a while now. So we have that, and we've been reviewing the comments, and appreciate everyone who has submitted a written comment, and also appreciate those of you who are here tonight to offer up oral comment, many of whom have also submitted written comment. So we have both your written comment, and we'll have your oral comment here in just a minute. So with that, I think I'll turn it over to Michelle. Other than, let me say one more thing about the commenting. I am going to plan to call groups of commenters, and then we'll just, so I'm not breaking in, we'll just go from one commenter to the next. So we'll work in small groups, and I'll start a group by naming the names, and we'll go on the order named. So with that, Michelle, do you want to provide the kind of statement that we make when we open for public comment, pardon me?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Good morning, Chair Van, or good morning, good evening, Chair Van Brocklin.
It's morning somewhere, Michelle. I'm not sure.
Yes, thank you, thank you. And so it sounds like we're ready to commence the public comment session. At this time, I do only have 17 individuals on the public comment line. That doesn't say that they will join later. So as we go through the list, and you call their names, if they don't answer, we'll just move on to the next one. So okay. At this moment, and as a reminder to everyone who is providing oral testimony, you do have 3 minutes, and please state your full name for the record. And so we will start off with RJ. So, well,
actually, I want to do it a little differently, Michelle, if I might. So I think what I'm going to do is, if they're here, I would like to begin with, we have one elected official on this list, Multnomah County Commissioner Jessica Vega Peterson. So I'd like to call on her, and immediately following her, Sarah Iannarone. If they could just go in succession. You have up to 3 minutes. And so is Commissioner Vega Peterson here?
Give me one moment.
And then if you could also admit Sarah as well, we would, well, maybe you may not be able to admit two at once, but I'd like to hear from both of them if they're here. And then I'll go into these groups. Is she here?
Yes, I do have Sarah. I do not have Commissioner Vega-Peterson on the line at this moment, but I do have Sarah on the line and she is unmuted.
Okay, welcome. And you have up to 3 minutes. You should see on your screen the countdown. And so up to 3 minutes. So welcome, Sarah.
Well, thank you for having me. Good evening, commissioners. As you said, my name is Sarah Iannaron, and I did just run for Portland mayor on a progressive platform, which included a municipal Green New Deal, fareless transit, car-free zones across the city, and putting our money where our mouth is on Vision Zero. Unfortunately, I lost, but not by as much as you might have imagined with a platform like that. In fact, over half of Portlanders voted against the status quo and in support of aggressive climate action and redistributive justice at the local level. And we're just going to keep growing our numbers and building our power under the umbrella of the Our Portland PAC, on whose behalf I'm here today. But I guess you're wondering what that's got to do with you, OTC. And I'm here to let you know that although progressives may have lost in Portland this November, we're not going anywhere. And in fact, we're stronger than ever and going to be here budget after budget, decision after decision, in part to call out ODOT for some of the sham public processes that we've seen, deceptive masks, climate denying debt finance mega projects, and the very real blood on all of our hands with the hundreds of traffic deaths on Oregon roads each year. You've read the analysis from ODOT's climate office so that you know the non-highway option will do the most to address equity, climate, and safety. While it's not enough, $321 million in multimodal funding is the minimum we must invest to build a 21st century transportation system. Oregon and the Portland metro area have a global reputation for transportation and climate leadership. I've been on international best practices trips and ridden municipal subways and national high-speed rail systems, even with some of you on the commission. So I know that Oregon looks like a backwater in comparison. The problem is in large part political, but it's also ODOT's 20th century thinking of itself as a highway building administration. It's holding us back. We have the very real opportunity now and the resources to move beyond this into something truly sustainable. I hear you. Listen, fix the potholes and do it first, but stop using maintenance as an excuse for perpetually shortchanging the important investments in safety infrastructure and climate justice that need to be done with urgency. ODOT staff needs to stop presenting my community with the false choice between road maintenance, traffic safety, and climate action, and you, OTC, need to stop enabling them. Freeway expansion is not economic recovery, nor reparations, nor a green jobs plan. It is throwing money down the toilet in terms of congestion relief. Induced demand is real, and we need to make sure that we're not allowing spin to trump science. Anyway, I anticipate this isn't going to change much of your decision-making today until someone higher up forces us to change. Maybe it will be Biden and Buttigieg. We can hope. I just popped by to put you on notice that for the foreseeable future, Progressive Portland is watching, and we're going to be showing up and demanding transparency, accountability, and precision in accounting while highlighting potential inequities in ODOT projects coming down the pike. Thank you for your service, and have a good evening.
Thank you very much, Sarah. We appreciate your testimony. Is Commissioner Vega-Peterson here yet?
Yes, Chair Boston, she is here, and I will unmute her.
Okay. Welcome, Commissioner. The floor is yours for up to 3 minutes, and we appreciate your being here.
Thank you, Chair. Chair Van Brockland and other commissioners, thank you for the opportunity to testify this evening. I'm Multnomah County Commissioner Jessica Vega-Peterson, and tonight I'm testifying on behalf of myself and Chris Warner, Director of Portland's Bureau of Transportation. I want to start by applauding the analysis that you've provided on climate equity and safety outcomes in the 2024-27 statewide transportation improvement plan update. We appreciate that you've identified the need to address systemic barriers to meeting those goals or outcomes-based process for developing a proposed funding scenario. But we want to ask you further. This year, we got to one of our work years for traffic fatalities in Multnomah County. Thus far, 39 people traffic crashed on the streets within Portland in 2020, and 40% of those crashes occurred in state-owned facilities. Additional 20 have died on other roadways, which is a total of 81 deaths. People in more neighborhoods East Portland and Multnomah County are more likely to be victims of traffic crashes, and transportation remains one of the largest contributors to statewide greenhouse gas emissions. In order to make real progress in safety, equity, and climate, there must be a significant and sustained commitment to investing in projects that reduce climate emissions, increase safety, and decrease transportation inequities. We need to address these challenges immediately. Both the Oregon Transportation Safety Action Plan identifies the goal of eliminating deaths and life-changing injuries on Oregon's transportation system by 2035, and the Governor of Oregon's Climate Executive Order calls on Oregon to reduce greenhouse gas emissions at least 45% below 1990 levels by 2035. As you know, unfortunately, we are not on track to meet these goals. Based on the evaluation of the 4 scenarios presented in advance of the December 1st OTC meeting, we were in favor of Scenario 2, non-highway. Scenario 2 increases the amount of non-highway funding by $172 million and doubles the percentage of the STIP going to non-highway. Although this is a relatively small change in the overall STIP, your analysis shows that this is what is needed to make significant gains towards our equity and climate goals. We are also hopeful that with additional non-highway funding, we will be able to provide significant investments to improve safety and help transform orphan highways like 82nd Avenue. At the December 1st OTC meeting, you introduced 3 new hybrid scenarios that had not been previously seen by the public. We're concerned that there has not been enough time for stakeholders to understand these new scenarios and provide meaningful feedback. Out of the new scenarios, we are most supportive of Scenario 3B. However, we urge you to either focus on the original scenarios or provide more time for public comment and postpone a final decision until January. Regardless of the funding scenario that is selected, we want to reiterate our strong support for investing in orphan highways like 82nd Avenue. We look forward to working closely with you on the next steps in development with the STIP, with shared clarity around the need to improve safety, equity, and climate outcomes, and a shared commitment to transparency. We can create the transportation system that our community expects of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Thank you for taking the time to be here, and we appreciate your comments, as well as your letter, your and Chris's letter. Thank you. So now I'd like to, Michelle, go to hearing from the following 5 in this order, so you can manage their coming on and off the system here. R.J. Shepard, then Neil Schulman, then Alan Chornett, then Amy Okoti Oyakan, and finally, pardon me if I mispronounced that, and then 5th, Aaron Brown. So let's take those 5 in the order I stated them, starting with R.J. Shepard, and then Neil Schulman would be next.
Okay, RJ, you are unmuted.
Welcome.
Great, thank you very much. My name is RJ Shepard with Bike Loud PDX. And first I want to thank Director Peets and the Climate Office for being so responsive to our questions as we move to the project selection phase. We ask that the Climate Office investigate how each project will improve equity, safety, and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Thank you to all those who wrote in to stop this step. This hearing is happening because of you, despite the OTC giving less than 3 business days to comment on over $2 billion in taxpayer funds. Our nation's trust in institutions is extremely frayed. This administration has attempted to hide and downplay the threat of a global pandemic, tried to throw out the results of a free and fair election, made a mockery of our legal system, and continuously discredited our free press. Trust in ODOT and the OTC is also extremely frayed. The OTC refused to move forward with an EIS for the I-5 Rose Quarter despite public comments, and every Rose Quarter Advisory Committee has been disbanded due to the inability of ODOT to hear the needs of the community over the din of widening I-5. So imagine our surprise when ODOT and the OTC tossed out the overwhelming public comments supporting the non-highway scenario, only to come up with 5 new scenarios with less than a week for the public to weigh in. As far as we know, none of the regional ACTs, nor advisory committees, nor Metro's JPACT has had a chance to comment on these new scenarios. In the spirit of Clause 14 of OTC's public involvement policy, we ask the OTC open public comment for 45 days and delay this vote until January 18th, 2021. If OTC prefers to move forward with the scenario today, we urge them to adopt the original non-highway scenario, which has already received widespread support and is the most ambitious scenario for equity, safety, and climate. Supporting the non-highway scenario means supporting a green recovery by creating thousands of good-paying local jobs, building tens of thousands of safer crosswalks, hundreds of miles of bike lanes and sidewalks, all while supporting our local economies. Every $1 million spent on active transportation creates 4 more jobs than highway expansion. And every dollar invested in our bike ped master plans will return $20 in lower transportation costs, cleaner air, healthcare savings, and lives saved. Let us restore trust in our institutions, support good-paying local union jobs, deliver cleaner air, safer streets for our families, and a habitable planet. Bike Loud PDX urges you to vote for a green recovery for Oregon and to choose the original non-highway scenario. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Neil Shulman?
One moment, sir. Let me get him unmuted. So I don't have him on the line, so it looks like we'll move to Alan.
Very good. Alan Jurnett, if I'm pronouncing that right.
Brooklyn and members of the commission. My name is Alan Jurnett. I'm from Jackson County. I'm commenting on behalf of 2 rural Oregon organizations. First is co-facilitator of Southern Oregon Climate Action Now, based in Jacksonville. And second is a steering committee member of the Rural Oregon Climate Political Action Committee, serving rural and coastal Oregon statewide. Overall, these organizations comprise some 2,000 rural and coastal Oregonians. As rural Oregonians, we live on the front lines of global warming. We live with the increasing temperatures, decreasing snowpack, increased drought, and increased fire risk, and not to mention rising sea levels. Our forests, our towns, our agriculture, and our livelihoods are at risk. Unless Oregon reduces its emissions, we as a state cannot ask other jurisdictions to reduce theirs. As rural and coastal Oregonians, we seek meaningful greenhouse gas action. Firstly, I'd like to make 4 brief points from the submitted testimony that I sent in. First, I appreciate that OTC has recommended increased funding for non-highway projects. This is critical. Second, I'd like to express concern that the 2024-2027 STIP really doesn't seem to go far enough to achieving the charge leveled at ODOT and OTC in the Governor's Executive Order 2004. Thirdly, I'd like to express concern that there appears to be a developing trend among agencies, regardless of how enthusiastically they appeared to have accepted the charge in the executive order, to not take that charge seriously and thus leave other agencies to do the heavy lifting or leave the executive order goals unmet. If Oregon is to take seriously the task of addressing global warming and its climate change consequences, all agencies must access the interim target and final goal and must plan agency programs that will achieve them. Since the transportation sector is responsible for the largest contribution of regulated greenhouse gas emissions in the state, this means ODOT and OTC should develop plans that will meet the charge of the executive order. We are concerned that the 2024-2027 STIP seems unlikely to contribute to achieving necessary reductions. Thank you for allowing me to comment, and thank you all for your service on the OTC.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your attendance and your comments. And I have also seen, I'm sure the other commissioners have, your written statement, so thank you for that too. Okay. Is Neil here yet, Michelle? Or should we move on to Amy?
I am not seeing Neil on the line, so yes, I think we should move on to Amy.
Okay.
And Amy, I have unmuted you.
Welcome, Amy.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, 3 minutes, please. Welcome.
Okay, thank you. Hi, as you said, my name is Amy. I'm a student at the University of Oregon, and I'm the Environmental and Climate Justice Coordinator for the Eugene Springfield National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. I'm an org that has been fighting for the rights of Black Americans and people of color since 1909. I rent property in downtown Eugene, and I'm also a Black woman. I can't think of too many things that have influenced the shape of the American landscape, like the invention of the car. That's because cars need roads and parking and places and communities that are built far away from one another so that we can keep making money off of people having to drive. What we're left with is an auto-oriented landscape where funding at all levels of government encourage more and wider highways and sprawling development, forcing people to live farther away from the things they need and the places they need to go, and generating more emissions to accomplish daily needs. So much so that any improvements in vehicle efficiency and vehicle electrification are being undermined by the fact that federal policy incentivizes car trips over all other trips. Transportation has the highest contribution to U.S. carbon emissions, and our transportation system produces nearly 40% of Oregon's greenhouse gas pollution. It kills nearly 500 people a year and chokes our communities with toxic air and fails to fully serve people who don't have access to a reliable or private vehicle. And we know that people of color are consistently exposed to more air pollution, and that highways have historically been built through Black and brown communities to displace them. Both me and my siblings suffered from childhood asthma because of these inequities. The status quo is not working. We are running out of time. The science says that we have 7 years before climate change is irreversible. We're celebrating our incrementalist approaches while communities in Oregon and all over the world are already losing their homes and lives to extreme weather because of climate change. So I'm begging you, OTC, to do your job and serve the people of this great state of Oregon. The 2024 to 2027 STIP package should invest as much as possible in non-highway projects. I am in support of the original non-highway project scenario, which supports dense and walkable communities and multimodal transportation options. This puts us on track to meet the goals of Governor Brown's climate change executive order, and it's the best path to maximize equity outcomes for low-income communities of color that are disproportionately burdened by our current transportation system. Thank you for this opportunity to comment.
Thank you very much, Amy. We appreciate your comments, and thank you for joining us tonight. So let's, if Neil is not here, let's move on to Aaron.
Aaron, you are unmuted.
Welcome, Aaron.
Fantastic. Thank you. Good evening, Chair Van Brockman, members of the Oregon Transportation Commission. My name is Aaron Brown. I am a tenant living in the North Portland neighborhood of St. John's with the No More Freeways Coalition. I'm here to voice my strong support for the OTC to live up to their values expressed by Oregonians across the state and support the S2 non-highway scenario. The last time that the Oregon Transportation Commission accepted public comment, astonishingly, was 10 months ago. I and a handful of local elected officials, community leaders, concerned parents, and youth climate justice leaders showed up on a rainy January afternoon to demand that this entity fulfill its responsibility to Oregonians across the state and provide the desperately needed oversight to the Oregon Department of Transportation. You'll notice that a lot of the themes that I and others spoke about 10 months ago are relevant once again to today's discussion, and arguably more so. You heard from us then about the need to reform this agency to reduce the state's carbon emissions. You heard from us then about the need to reduce air pollution. You heard from us then to address the epidemic of traffic accidents. You heard from us about tackling injustices in which BIPOC, low-income, disabled, youth, and senior Oregonians are poorly served by our state's transportation system. A month before that January meeting, we showed up at that hearing in Lebanon. We had sent 400 emails and 175 postcards, Chair Van Brockman, to you, begging for you to reevaluate your position on the Rose Quarter Freeway expansion. I know I'm usually pretty hard on y'all here at the OTC, and I know I've likely ruffled plenty of feathers and been kind of annoying. But in addition to asking for your vote for the S2 scenario, I have a favor to ask this evening. I ask that you consider the dozens of community leaders who took time to look up this Byzantine Commission and write letters and spend another rainy Tuesday calling in from home. I ask you to consider that we're doing this out of love for our community, a desire to make our state more fair and just for the most vulnerable,
and to stand on the shoulders of a previous generation of Oregon leadership who pioneered thoughtful stewardship for our natural environment through cogent land use and transportation decisions. And I bring that up to point out that we've identified you as the barrier to making that happen, unless you change direction. There are increased voices from outside the Portland region, from senior citizens relying on transit, from youth terrified about what climate dystopia awaits, all recognizing that you have the opportunity to change. Someday, the OTC is going to feel that heat. I am confident that the group of voices that are calling into these meetings is only going to continue to grow and demand more accountability. I'm confident you will rise to that challenge. Someday, the OTC will rise to that challenge and listen to these voices radicalized from the wildfires, the rising oceans, the strengthening storms, and the growing floods. And when you do rise to the challenge, it will cement your status, the 5 of you, as being part of the solution, as being part of a generation of leaders who answered that call. Today, you could do that. Tonight, you could answer that call and get this right. And if it's not today, just like our oceans and thermometers, the voices of people demanding this change is only going to rise every year. And it's only a question of how long until you recognize that we are counting on you to make this action and that this is your legacy that you are leaving behind. So in closing, please support scenario 2. Thank you to all who are writing in, and I look forward to your decision tonight. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Aaron. Appreciate your testimony and the submissions that you have provided not only in this round, but in as you mentioned, in prior hearings. So I want to make sure I check in on Neil here. Is he with us yet? Has he arrived?
Chair Van Brockland, I do know he's trying to connect to the meeting, so if you want to move on and we can save him for last, however you want to do that, but he is not on quite yet.
Okay, so let's go on to the second group. The second group will consist of Leanne O'Neill from Bend, Paxton Rothwell, Hal Hagedorn, Kristen Sartor, and Nolan Fothrop, in that order. Up to 3 minutes per commenter. And is Leanne on, Michelle?
Yep, she is on. And Leanne, you are unmuted.
Welcome, Leanne. 3 minutes, please.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Leanne O'Neill, and I use she and they pronouns. I live in Bend, Oregon, and I am the president of the board of directors of Bend Bikes, a grassroots nonprofit that advocates for the safety of people who bike and a comprehensive network of bike-friendly routes. I'm also a partner with Allyship in Action, a local equity and social justice consulting firm. On November 20th, Bend Bikes submitted joint comments with a dozen or so other organizations across the state imploring you to allocate the 2024-2027 SIP funds in alignment with scenario 2, the non-highway scenario. I was dismayed to see the commissions make last-minute changes to the SIP scenarios without properly providing notice of the changes and providing the requisite comment period for those changes, and so felt compelled to speak here today. Here in Bend, voters just elected leaders across the board who prioritize climate action, equity, and the safety of people who walk, bike, roll, and use public transit in our city. We need strong leadership from you to ensure our transportation system is safe, equitable, and comports with the Governor Brown's climate change mandate. While I understand that $320 million is not much in the scheme of our transportation system, your commitment to the original non-highway scenario would send a strong, clear message statewide that piecemeal change simply is not enough. Black, Indigenous, and people of color, LGBTQ folks, people with disabilities, and low-income people are the most impacted by historical transportation policies in Oregon that intentionally raise their neighborhoods, force them to move, and force them to live next to highways and deal with the most severe consequences of air pollution and climate change. Allocation of STIP funds to widen the I-5 is history repeating the same injustices of the past. Moreover, lower-income people of color inhale 38% higher levels of air pollution than white people. If people of color even had the same pollution enjoyed by white folks, it would prevent 7,000 deaths from heart disease in their communities each year. Low-income people are 2 times more likely to be killed while walking as high-income people. Black children are 2 times more likely to be killed while walking than white children, and Latinx children is 40% more likely. 40% of low-income housing areas and areas where communities of color live will have multimodal transportation infrastructure like sidewalks, bikes, big street crossings, whereas 90% of high-income areas will have this feature. institutions show where their priorities are through funding. So as a queer woman of color who relies on my bicycle as my primary mode of transportation year-round in Central Oregon and who breathes the fumes of idling engines every day, I'm asking for strong leadership. If you really want to show all residents of Oregon that you prioritize climate action, equity, and the safety of people of all races, sexual orientations, genders, abilities, ages, and incomes, I'm asking you to please allocate the 2024-2027 STIP money in alignment with the original Scenario 2 non-highway scenario. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you very much. Next is Paxton.
Paxton, you are unmuted.
Welcome, Paxton.
Hello, good evening. Hi. My name is Paxton Ruffle, and I'm commenting today as a representative of Sunrise PDX, Portland's hub for the National Sunrise Movement. I'm 26 years old, and I will be 36 years old in 2030, the year that IPCC says that my climate fate will be sealed. I am submitting this testimony in opposition to the OTC approving any of these new proposals, and ask instead that the OTC approve the original option 2 that invested over $300 million in non-highway programming. Like my fellow Oregonians, I've experienced a multitude of hazards and a lack of basic infrastructure as a pedestrian on Oregon state highways. Back in April of this year, a group of my friends and I hiked 14 miles of the Crown Zellerbach Trail to Vernonia Lake. To our surprise, the last mile and a half of the trail was along Oregon Highway 47, a 2-lane highway with a 35-mile-an-hour speed limit, narrow shoulders, and, to our dismay, no sidewalk. We trekked, tired from our hike, along this highway with trucks and cars speeding by, walking past the homes of local Vernonians until we made it to our car parked at Vernonia Lake. Today, thinking back on this terrifying experience, I think what it must be like to live in one of those homes. I cannot fathom what it would be like to live on a dead-end street in a small town and know that my only safe option to get into town would be to drive my car. Though the state of Oregon is pushing the state and local agencies to address the challenges of climate change, success only comes when all individuals have the ability to change their transportation habits in ways that are less reliant on fossil fuels. How are these residents expected to shift to a more sustainable transportation habit and rise to the challenge of facing climate change when they have no practical, safe way to travel the 1 mile into town without using their car? The goal of climate equity cannot be met until simple bike, pedestrian, and transit options are available statewide to connect residents with their communities. The Sunrise Movement acknowledges that climate justice begins when we pay attention to the injustices that are harming the most underserved members of society. The example of the residents in Vernonia being effectively forced to use their gasoline cars for even simple errands proves how climate injustice disproportionately affects some more than others. The residents of Portland, Eugene, Roseburg, and Medford have some, albeit inadequate, options available to them to choose lower carbon transportation options, but the residents of Vernonia have none. It is ODOT's responsibility to make sure that Oregon state highways provide for all needs possible for the members of the community that the highway runs through. These investments are enormously cost-effective compared to spending billions of dollars on highways and freeways. The people of Oregon need projects as simple as putting a sidewalk on one side of Highway 47 in Vernonia, projects as simple as adding bike lanes to existing highways that are too wide. We need ODOT and OTC to support the non-highway STIP and to provide even more funding than that if the state is going to meet the climate goals set out by Governor Brown's Executive Order 2004 and reach carbon neutrality by 2050. Thank you for your consideration, and I plead that you reject all 3 hybrid STIP models and urge you to instead vote in favor of the non-highway STIP scenario. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Paxton. Appreciate your being here tonight. We'll move on to Hal. I'm pronouncing that right. Apologies if I'm not.
Hal, you are unmuted.
Yes, that is correct. Okay, great. Thank you. Chair Van Brocklin and members of the Commission, thank you for hearing public comments tonight. My name is Hal Hagedorn, and I am the chair of the Oregon Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee. And I also serve as an at-large member on the Region 1 Act. However, tonight I'm commenting on behalf of myself and OMPAC. In the 1970s, Oregon passed 3 landmark environmental laws, the Bottle Bill, land use laws, and the Bike Bill, creating a legacy of environmentalism where recycling is in our ethos, where we prioritize the preservation of farmlands, forests, and green space, and biking is walking is what we do as Oregonians. This concern for the environment is a core value for Oregonians, and I'm pleased to see the OTC finally considering an increase in funding for non-highway investments. However, because of chronic underinvestment over the last 50 years, only 44% of the sidewalk and bikeway network along urban state highways are complete. An additional $53 million per year is needed to complete the walking and biking network just on the urban state highway system by 2050. With current funding levels, we are only able to build about 1 mile per year of off-street paths. And competitive funding programs such as the Safe Routes to School are oversubscribed 5-to-1. The need is great. While the projected STIP increases may seem significant compared to past investments, we are at a crossroads and facing a climate crisis where non-highway investments are needed to address the issues created by auto dependency. This requires not incremental investments, but the courage to fully invest in strategies that will make a difference. As we are facing an existential climate crisis of epic proportions, I ask you, what kind of legacy will you leave for your children and grandchildren or future Oregonians? I am disappointed that the original non-highway option is no longer being considered. However, of those that remain, hybrid 3B is the only scenario that focuses major investments in the areas that will allow ODOT to make any progress on reducing greenhouse gas emissions and improving multimodal mobility while addressing serious social transportation inequities. We are hopeful that you will make the right and just decision and look forward to continuing to work with you to have the transportation values of our state reflected not only in the STIP, but other decisions in order to produce an equitable, healthy, and safe transportation system that serves the needs of all Oregonians. Thank you.
Thank you, Hal, very much. Kristen Sartor.
Kristen, you're unmuted.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kristen Sartor. I'm here as a concerned member of the Portland community. As we all know, this has been a year of countless deaths in our country. Many of us have lost loved ones or know people who have. A few days ago, I spoke with a woman who told me she lost her daughter to COVID-19. The loss, grief, and trauma that losing a loved one brings us is deep and pervasive. It is even more jarring when it is wholly preventable. Today, I'm asking you to think about the 48 pedestrian deaths in Portland that have occurred in the past 3 years. The 48 preventable deaths, each coming with grief and trauma from that person's community, their parents, their children, their partners, their siblings, and their friends. Every single one of these 48 humans died in low-income neighborhoods, which are desperately in need of investment in safety for pedestrians and bikers. And just like COVID-19, this has the greatest impact on our non-white communities. Black Portlanders are 3 times as likely to be killed by a car when crossing the street as white Portlanders. The words safety and equity are words that I hear being used by the OTC. Often it feels like these words are hollow, designed to paint us a picture of what we want to see. If safety is truly the priority, we will improve the safety of roads like 82nd, Killingsworth, and Barber, rather than expanding a highway under the guise of addressing fender benders. If equity was truly of importance, we would reject further deteriorating the air quality around our low-income communities who are located near ODOT highways surrounded by pollution. The effects of that air quality has a lifelong effect on those community members. I am ready to see tangible actions to back up the words of safety and equity, and these to be central to where we spend our billions and billions of dollars. I respectfully urge you to reject highway expansion and choose the original non-highway scenario, supporting safety and projects for biking, walking, and transit. Investing in alternative transportation infrastructure and beginning tolling drivers are much more positive, efficient ways to address congestion than the environmentally and socially reckless proposition of expanding another highway. Let's create a better world for our grandchildren by choosing to invest in a project that promotes a healthier, more equitable way of life and planet, not just in words, but in reality. Thank you very much for your time and your service.
Thank you. Appreciate your being here tonight. Nolan Fothrop.
Nolan, you're unmuted.
Yeah, hi, my name is Nolan Fothrop. Thank you to the Commission for the opportunity to speak tonight. I'd like to make it clear that I don't support any of the STIP hybrid scenarios under the consideration. I'd like to request a 45-day public comment period for the revised 24 to 27 scenarios and to demand scenarios that reflect the state's need for multimodal options. The revised hybrid scenarios make dangerous cuts to non-highway spending. ODOT's analysis shows that these scenarios result in minimal improvements to GHG reduction and multimodal availability, both of which received failing grades in ODOT's analysis. To that end, I would request that the Commission engage non-highway options that have been reviewed by the public and which get closer to the other scenarios to achieving ODOT and OTC's goals. Based on ODOT's climate analysis, the non-highway option would do the most to address equity, climate, and safety. And while it's not enough, $321 million in multimodal funding is the minimum that we need to invest to build the transportation system that Oregon desperately needs. Frankly, I don't see why we need to settle for that minimum. Tonight we're discussing funding in the magnitude of $2 billion and with human costs in the hundreds of lives. As a result, I would advocate a STIP plan that commits safety and non-highway spending in the magnitude of $1 billion for 2024 to 2027, commensurate with the goals that ODOT, OTC, the governor, and municipalities around the state have set for themselves to 2030, 2050, and beyond. Thank you.
Mr. Shulman, has he arrived?
He has not arrived yet.
Okay. So
but thank you for asking.
I'll keep asking. So let's move on to the next group of five. That would be Elizabeth Grazer Lindsay, Lyle Mordhorse, Jane Stackhouse, Brandon Naramore, and Kai McMurtry. So Elizabeth would be next.
Yep, Elizabeth, you are unmuted.
Welcome, Elizabeth.
This is Elizabeth. Hi, this is Elizabeth Grazer Lindsay. I live in Beaver Creek, Oregon, which is part of rural Clackamas County. The climate impacts of heat and drought are harming my farm and forest. Last September, my family had to evacuate our farm and livestock due to the wildfires. We were engulfed in thick smoke for weeks, harming us and our livestock and preventing crop growth. Droughtiness has shortened the pasture season and has forced us to buy more hay. In 2018, our mature Douglas fir trees began to die for the first time due to the severe conditions. Our rural roads lack alternatives to driving vehicles. Despite heavy traffic, there aren't shoulders to accommodate us to safely bike or walk to the rural center for groceries or meetings, or for kids to get themselves to school. Bikes and pedestrians can only travel in the same lane as cars, and there also aren't buses. Please turn to the graphs on pages 40 to 42 of your revised Appendix C. The governor's executive order and several laws direct OTC to prioritize climate action in the transportation sector to achieve the climate target of 45% reduction in emissions below the 1990 level. That would be a 3% per year emission reduction, except that Oregon's transportation emissions have increased. So the emission reduction actually needs to be 4% per year. There is currently no evidence that any of the 2024 to 27 STIP scenarios are designed to achieve this 4% cumulative reduction in each of the 3 years. The governor directs you to prioritize climate action in your planning and budgeting, not to act in ignorance. To select a STIP scenario in the absence of evidence that it can reduce emissions to the state's targets would put you and ODOT out of compliance with the law.
Sounds like it. Okay, thank you for commenting, Elizabeth. Appreciate it very much. We'll move on now to Lyle Mordhorst.
And Chair Van Brocklin, Lyle is not on the line, so we can move next to Jane Stackhouse.
Okay. Thank you, Michelle.
Sorry, thank you. Jane, you're unmuted.
Thank you. Chair Van Brocklin and Commission members, my name is Jane Stackhouse. I'm a member of the OLTV Metro Climate Action Team and a resident of Northeast Portland. I appreciate the Commission's awareness of climate change and the need to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. The formation of the Climate Office within ODOT demonstrates your understanding of the need for us to act. The Climate Office has already provided a useful evaluation tool with the color coding to summarize the impact of various STIP scenarios. We need ways to evaluate our programs toward cutting our emissions in half by 2035. It's too easy to give up if we imagine only chaos and climate destruction. You know those are all real and coming at us. Let's rather imagine new ways of getting to work, obtaining the goods and services we want and need, and being involved in our communities. Ways that do not emit greenhouse gases and dangerous particulate matter. I encourage you to adopt the non-highway option for the STIP. It has the most green boxes. And in addition, it's projected to provide a slight reduction in emissions and small improvements in congestion, social equity, and multimodal transportation. Of course, a slight reduction in emissions is not enough. And I know you will look at other ways to reduce emissions from the transportation sector, and everyone I've heard testify tonight will be here to help you do that. Please also consider that the multimodal options are less than half of the STIP budget. I suggest that the majority of fix-it funds be directed to rural Oregon, where the lack of density and distance favor on-road vehicles at this time, while we are developing wider shoulders and multimodal transportation options in rural Oregon. I also suggest that you mandate use of the lowest carbon-intensive construction materials and equipment beginning now and in the 2024-27 STIP. Although these materials and equipment may seem to cost more, they are fiscally the most responsible and least expensive option when we consider the costs of dealing with more severe climate disruptions. I thank you for the opportunity to comment and imagine a cleaner future.
And on your comment about vehicles and construction materials, et cetera, we are certainly looking hard at that in the Climate Office and trying to take a comprehensive view of how we're working and how we can shrink our carbon footprint as an agency. So let's move on to Brandon.
Brandon, you are unmuted.
Hi, my name is Brandon. I'm a resident of Southwest Portland. I am testifying today in support of the original non-highway scenario. If ODOT's mission is to truly provide a safe and reliable multimodal transportation system that connects people, and less than the non-highway scenario is a clear answer to which option connects with our supposed values. There have been 53 auto fatalities in Portland this year alone. Many of the victims are pedestrians. This is morally unacceptable and an indictment of our transportation system, much of which ODOT is the steward of. We have an obligation to these victims and their families to make our streets safer. If we instead prioritize the expansion of highways while ignoring that too many streets lack proper sidewalks, then we'll have shamefully given up on our shared responsibility. Let's do the right thing and invest in non-highway projects that allow Oregonians of all ages, abilities, and income levels to get safely, affordably, and conveniently to where we need to go. Thank you. Bye. Oh, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Next would be Kai McMurtry. Michelle?
And Chair Van Brocklin, Kai is not on the line either, so we can move to Dan.
Yeah, this next group I wanted to just call out so people have an opportunity to know they're coming up. Dan Mcfarlane, followed by Danielle Millard, then Aaron Salzman, then Michelle Dewberry, and then Corey Parrish. So Dan is next.
So I guess Dan is not on the line anymore. So
Okay.
we will jump to Danielle. Give me one moment. Danielle, you were unmuted.
Welcome, Danielle.
Hello. Thank you. My name is Danielle Maillard. I live in Southeast Portland, and I'm an organizer with Sunrise PDX. I'm here today because I've become overwhelmingly disenchanted with the conditional equity practices that plague ODOT and so many other groups. As individuals, I'm sure we hold similar values, and I am aware of the work that some of you have done and are doing to promote equitable and sustainable futures for your communities. However, in much of ODOT's work, equity is only promoted if it's convenient and profitable. ODOT's own site reads, quote, historically and currently underrepresented and underserved communities experience negative impacts from our existing transportation system due to past investment and development patterns, end quote. If anything other than the choice to fund the non-highway scenario is made, the OTC is contributing to the same impacts that ODOT has publicly condemned, and I just do not get it. The whole page labeled equity and mobility is filled with this flowery language. There's an entire section dedicated to stakeholder involvement, and you just violated the public involvement policy, furthering the inequities already inherent in the process of public engagement. It's upsetting and it's dangerous, ironically, as safety is what ODOT claims to be at the center of its proposals. But it's the same pattern. Safety is promoted when it's convenient and profitable, because middle schoolers are not safe when they cannot breathe due to freeway pollution, and the people living east of 82nd are not safe when they're 3 times more likely to die while crossing the street than those who live on the west side. And nobody is safe when transportation accounts for more and more of carbon emissions in our state every year. We need bold action on equity, safety, and climate. And you have the opportunity today to make a decision that rejects that notion that equity, safety, and climate action are contingent on their convenience and profitability. This is why I'm urging you to adopt the original S2 non-highway scenario. We need to begin investing in people, not highways, and there are so many incredible alternatives being formed by those who are most impacted by transportation injustices, and we just need to start listening. Thank you.
Michelle?
Oh, Chair, now we will move on to Aaron, and Aaron, you are unmuted.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes. Welcome.
Perfect.
Thank you for coming.
Thanks. Appreciate it. My name's Aaron Saltzman, and I'm the Climate Advocacy Associate at Ecumenical Ministries of Oregon, which represents 150 faith communities across the state and serves 300,000 Oregonians annually through our 8 direct service programs. First, EMO would like to thank the Commission and staff for all your work compiling funding scenarios and soliciting and weighing public comment. Deciding on STIP funding involves weighing a host of competing values, and it's not an overstatement to say that the consequences of this funding decision will be felt for generations to come. We're grateful for your work and for the opportunity to play a role in this incredibly important process. EMO urges the Commission to restore the 4 original STIP funding scenarios, extend the comment period for all 8 scenarios, and give more priority to the scenarios that mitigate climate change and benefit Oregon's most underserved populations. Of the 8 scenarios, we believe that the original non-highway scenario is the only one that gives us a chance to rectify historic inequities by treating climate change and co-pollution as the crises they are. By the Commission's own assessment, climate change mitigation is our transportation system's biggest deficiency, earning a D-. This rating is inconsistent with Oregon's reputation as a leader on climate action, and incremental pathways to improving this rating are insufficient. As this year's destructive wildfire season showed us, and as the majority of public comments have highlighted throughout this process, Oregon's leadership on climate action must, more than ever, involve swift and significant changes to our transportation system.
Improved public health and social equity are just two of the many co-benefits that the non-highway scenario promises. Most of EMO's 300,000 annual clients are low-income people and Black and Indigenous people of color. These groups currently experience the most harm from Oregon's transportation system through unhealthy air pollution and inadequate public transportation. They're also the most likely to benefit from investments in non-highway transportation infrastructure. By choosing the non-highway scenario, the Commission will make Oregon's transportation system safer, more sustainable, more equitable, and healthier for all Oregonians, especially those who have been historically marginalized by our transportation system. Finally, to ensure proper consideration of these facts, EMO urges the Commission to delay a vote on the STIP scenarios until the public has had the full 45-day period to comment on the 8 scenarios as mandated by the Commission's public involvement policy. Thank you for considering my comments, and we look forward to providing further input during the full comment period.
Thank you very much, Aaron. I appreciate your comments, and we appreciate your being here. Michelle Dewberry.
Michelle, you are unmuted.
Good evening, Chair Van Brocklin and members of the Commission. My name is Michelle Dewberry, and I'm a resident of North Portland. And I want to urge you to support the non-highway funding scenario for the 2024 through 2027 STIP. My husband and I just marked the 10th anniversary of our son Seamus's death. He was killed by a careless driver on ODOT-owned North Lombard Street on a walk home from the grocery store at 22 months old. Each year we watch with horror as more of our public money is invested in infrastructure that prioritizes cars that will only lead to more deaths on our roads while also contributing to the climate crisis. Every day, I think about simple, inexpensive infrastructure changes that might have saved my son or any of the hundreds of people killed and injured on Portland streets in the years since he died. And I wonder why ODOT continues to prioritize cars in the face of the twin crises of pedestrian fatalities and climate change. Maybe if I told you some of the details of what I saw that day, described the body of my 30-pound toddler with stitches running the length of his abdomen, yellow bruises peeking out beneath the cast on his broken arm, or the hat that the nurses put on his head to cover the wound from his craniectomy. Through my involvement with Families for Safe Streets, I have met countless others who can tell similar stories about children and loved ones killed in preventable crashes. This is the natural outcome of a government that cares more about the convenience of drivers than the safety of vulnerable community members, like kids in strollers, like seniors, people of color, people with disabilities, low-income people, all of whom are more likely to be killed in traffic violence. I have 2 surviving children, 8-year-old twins who love to ride their bikes and walk around Portland. It is all of our responsibility to ensure a habitable planet and a city where they can safely navigate without a car. Please bring back the non-highway funding scenario. It won't solve everything, but it would be a start. Thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you, Michelle. Obviously, extend our sincerest condolences, and I appreciate your taking the time to be here and sharing with us your thoughts on this. Corey Parrish.
And Chair Van Brocklin, Corey is not on the line, so we can move to Rob. And Rob, I have unmuted you.
So Rob, just so those in waiting know, after you, we will hear from Brett Morgan, then Akashdeep Singh, then Julie Chapman, then Paul Thompson, and then Gwen Jaspers. So Rob, welcome.
Thank you. This is Rob Zako. Thank you for this opportunity to comment on funding scenarios for the 2024-2027 STIP. I wear many different hats, including being a research associate at the University of Oregon and the School of Planning, Public Policy, and Management. A few years ago, I led a research project on the effectiveness of transportation funding mechanisms for achieving national, state, and metropolitan economic, health, and other livability goals. The project produced a toolkit of best practices drawn from all over the country. I'd like to share with you just one short case study, and I quote from the toolkit. The question of who pays is the flip side of the question of who benefits. An outcomes-based approach looks at both sides of the equation. Taxpayers will support taxes only so long as they believe the benefits justify the costs. In the short term, proposed new taxes should make clear to taxpayers what outcomes those taxes will buy. In terms that are meaningful in the long term, when transportation agencies increase taxpayers' understanding of how funding will be used, taxpayers are more likely to support measures to increase transportation revenues. For example, to build support for new transportation revenues, Massachusetts promised taxpayers greater accountability by reforming its project selection process at the same time. The 2013 Transportation Finance Law raised transportation funding and created a new process called We Move Massachusetts, Planning for Performance, for selecting projects that relies on measurable criteria to score, rank, and prioritize them. That's in the toolkit. Massachusetts took a systematic approach to planning, performance measures, and project selection, engaging the public throughout the process. Alas, what I see with the current ODOT STIP is an ad hoc last-minute effort. Developing scenarios and the scenario analysis report were good steps, but that report was just released last month and does not even analyze the hybrid scenarios you'll be considering tonight. In the short run, perhaps this is the best ODOT can do, but the level of analysis is too thin and too recent to allow the public, as well as you, to make an informed decision. To maintain the trust of taxpayers, ODOT can and must do better. Fortunately, you do not need to reinvent the wheel. You can leverage best practices from elsewhere. I invite your staff to download the toolkit from the National Institute for Transportation Communities at Portland State University. Thank you.
Brett Morgan is next.
And Brett is not on the line.
Okay. So let's move on to Akashdeep Singh. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, as I'm sure I am.
No, that's
Did I do okay?
Yes, you did all right. No worries.
Thank you. Please, the floor is yours. 3 minutes.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Akash Singh, they, them, from Oregon Environmental Justice, Oregon. As for Clause 14 of the OTC Public Involvement Policy, any major updates to the proposed STIP must be followed by a 45-day comment period. If the OTC is not planning to offer a 45-day comment period for the new scenarios, the OTC must choose from the original 4. As a result of analysis from ODOT's Climate Office, it is clear that the non-highway scenario will do the most to address equity, climate, and safety. While it is still not enough, $321 million in multimodal funding is the minimum we must invest to build a 21st century transportation system. Portland is a city whose history is built on racial injustice and whose brand of green environmentalism often does not take environmental justice concerns into meaningful account. People of color have lost access to public transit. Communities in historically Black neighborhoods have been torn apart by highways and are disproportionately affected by pollution, which can have devastating and or fatal consequences to public health of Portlanders who are already more likely to suffer during the COVID-19 pandemic. In a year of global crises compounded, now is the time for leadership that looks forward to a sustainable future in which our communities and environment can thrive, not just survive. A future in which pedestrians are not at a constant risk of dying because of our reckless investments in roads over public transportation, one in which people of color are now more susceptible to public health consequences because of vehicular pollution, and where we can place our constructive energies into transformative and not incremental that leaves so many of us behind. Portland and Oregon have a reputation of being environmental leaders. The OTC can choose to act upon that reputation of leadership by adopting bold and necessary action that actually improves the lives of marginalized communities in Portland and indeed across the state. Our communities have been polluted, neglected, and used under the guise of equity and processes that actively ignore our voices. Listen to our voices today, understand the historical harm done to our communities, and vote to invest not in roads, but our futures. Thank you so much for the opportunity to give input. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your attending and your thoughtful comments. So we'll move now to Julie Chapman.
Julie, you are unmuted.
Yes.
Fantastic.
Thank you, Michelle. Chair Van Brocklin, Vice Chair Simpson, and members of the Commission, thank you for this opportunity to speak with you. My name is Julie Chapman. I'm speaking for the League of Women Voters of Oregon. The League has previously submitted 2 letters of concern about the design of the 2024-27 STIP. This year in October, ODOT and the OTC laid out an excellent review of the agency's goals and challenges. Your strategic action plan provides clear guidance for allocating these funds. It calls for pursuing social equity goals and providing access to active and public transportation, implementation of transformative technologies, electrification of the transportation system, and a reduction in our carbon footprint. These priorities must be translated into the goals of the Governor's Executive Order 20-04. The timeline for this STIP falls squarely within our state mandate to reduce transportation emissions to 11.5 million metric tons by 2035. This means that we need to reduce these emissions by about 1 million metric tons each year. While we may have accomplished that during this economically bruising year, we don't see how that reduction is reflected in the hybrid scenarios. My dad was a civil engineer, and he taught me that data matter, concrete goals matter, and we need timelines for when we'll reach these goals. We lack data about the impacts of the various STIP scenarios on emissions reductions and investments in vulnerable communities. We would like an analysis of how proposed projects will accomplish the required emission reductions and equity benefits analyzed by scenario. As you have called out, we need transformative investments. The Governor has designated ODOT as a leader in facilitating the electrification of our transportation system. Low-income and rural Oregonians are not opposed to adopting ZEVs. They need help from ODOT to have access to rapid charging. We also need to prioritize efficient rural and urban transit systems and multimodal non-highway approaches to get from point A to point B. We're asking that you elevate your own strategic action goals to increase and quantify significant investments in equity and emission reductions resulting from any STIP scenario proposed. Thank you for inviting us to share our concerns.
Thank you very much, Julie. So now, Paul Thompson. Paul, are you here? Pardon me, Michelle, is Paul here?
We do have Gwen before Paul.
I put Paul into the batting order next.
Okay, so we'll go with Paul. So give me 1 second. Paul, you are unmuted.
Welcome, Paul.
I am here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Chair Van Brocklin and Commissioners, good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to testify. I'm Paul Thompson, the manager of the Central Lane Metropolitan Planning Organization, or MPO, and today I'm representing the Central Lane MPO Policy Board, which asked me to testify on their behalf. The Central Lane MPO represents the second largest city, the second largest MPO, and the second largest transit provider in Oregon. I'm testifying today to reaffirm the MPO's commitment to funding the non-highway category as the #1 priority. The MPO was pleased in September to see the original non-highway scenario #2 receive a significant boost in proposed non-highway funding compared to the baseline scenario. Additional information presented in October supported investing in the non-highway scenario and realizing significant improvements in mitigating greenhouse gas emissions, social equity, and multimodal mobility. Moving forward into the 2 December OTC meetings and the narrowing of the possible funding scenarios to hybrids 2A, 2B, and 3B, the Central Lane MPO would first like to ask you to continue considering and prioritize the original Scenario 2. Scenario 2 provides by far the most funding for non-highway projects and programs and will result in the most improvements in mitigating greenhouse gas emissions, improving social equity, and expanding and improving multimodal mobility. As just one example, Scenario 2, which provided $321 million for non-highway, was projected to allow for completion of the state's bicycle pedestrian network in 50 years, as compared to 150 years under the baseline scenario. Now the proposed non-highway funding in scenarios 2A, 2B, and 3B would complete that network in some 60 to 100 years. Do we really want to wait beyond our lifetimes up to a full century to accomplish that? If scenario 2 has truly been removed from further consideration, the Central Lane MPO supports hybrid scenario 3B, as it provides the most funding among the 3 hybrid scenarios for non-highway investments. However, scenario 3B provides $51 million less in non-highway funding than scenario 2, and the MPO is disappointed to see the scenarios remaining under consideration move in that direction. It is our belief that, on the margin, $51 million will accomplish a lot more in the non-highway funding category than it could possibly accomplish in the enhanced category. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, slide number 8 that you will see later tonight in the PowerPoint presentation illustrates not only how non-highway funding has been reduced compared to scenario 2, but how the outcomes have shifted as a result. We understand that one goal of the OTC, as you have stated in earlier meetings, may be to eliminate the red in the outcome analysis. But that is essentially the peanut butter approach and does little to make truly significant or notable improvements in any of the outcomes. Unfortunately, scenario 3B accomplishes exactly 0 notable improvement outcomes, according to the staff analysis. And across all 3 of the hybrid scenarios still under consideration, only 1 notable improvement outcome is achieved. Under scenario 2A for congestion relief outcomes. Congestion relief is far from the priority of the Central Lane MPO and many others who have testified tonight. In fact, all 3 of hybrid scenarios 2A, 2B, and 3B completely remove the notable improvements that could have been achieved under the original scenario 2. This seems to be moving in the wrong direction. We ask that you reach for notable improvements by selecting scenario 2. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Paul. Now, Gwen.
When you are unmuted.
Okay.
Gwen.
Thank you to. Okay, hello.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes, very well, thank you.
Yes, okay. Well, thank you to all the commissioners for this chance to testify. As a layperson, it is difficult for me to fully comprehend the details and the pressures that your commission is under around the state transportation needs. I am aware, though, that transportation decisions by this commission and others like it hold enormous influence and a grave responsibility over the even more pressing need to reduce greenhouse gas emissions to a level that will sustain life. In 2010, a special session of the Oregon legislature passed Senate Bill 1059, which included a declaration of climate emergency. It calls on state transportation and land use agencies, including the Oregon Transportation Commission, to work on reducing transportation greenhouse gas emissions. What started as a gradual decline in greenhouse gases released in the years immediately following 2010 ended with a higher emission level in 2016, the most recent year with adequate statistics, a higher level in 2016 than in 2010. This is very bad news, especially as we are running out of time. Forbes magazine reported in July 2020 that according to the latest World Meteorological Organization report, there is an approximately 20% chance that global average temperatures could exceed 1.5 degrees Celsius in at least one of the next 5 years. 1.5 degrees Celsius increase, as you know, will put increased pressures on natural and human systems. What is additionally worrying is we cannot rely on or wait for that magic technological fix. We certainly can't wait for laws from the federal government. No, we must face the music and act big and bold on a local level. Our leaders, our commissioners, i.e. you, must make big and bold decisions. And one such decision may be the elephant in the room. We must stop prioritizing the single occupancy vehicle. It's had its turn for way too long in our country, and it's wreaked havoc in more ways than just its deadly greenhouse gases. Active transportation and mass transit are working in other societies, it's about time they are embraced here as well. A good start is to offer Oregonians viable alternatives to their fossil-fueled vehicles. That's how I read in the original non-highway scenario. But that option has been diluted for the 3 hybrid scenarios you now have before you. Scenario number 3 might be doable after moving about $60 million from Enhance and dividing that amount between fix-it and non-highway projects. And yes, it is time, I believe, to call for a moratorium on new road construction, certainly on new or improved traffic lanes to accommodate greenhouse gas spewing vehicles. Providing reliable, modern mass transit and active transportation will not only reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but will contribute to less roadway congestion, provide health, safety, and other environmental benefits for the community. We've almost forgotten that cars and trucks pollute our air and take our land from food production and carbon drawdown. A bolder transition to non-highway transportation may not be easy or what is even expected by the general public, but someone, some agency or commission needs to have the courage and the conviction to take bold, judicious strides in a direction that greatly reduces our state's transportation sector's greenhouse gas emissions. Please, please be that commission. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, Michelle, I have a list of people that were not with had not joined the call previously. When we got to them, are any of them available now?
Yes, we do have Kai, Dan, and Brett on the line. So if you would like, we can take it in that order.
That would be great.
Great. So Kai, you are unmuted.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes. Welcome.
Thanks. My name is Kai. I live in Northeast Portland. I'll be brief. I live near 82nd Avenue. 82nd is just one of the many examples of our failure to prioritize residents, people over throughput and vehicles. 82nd lacks speed reduction measures. It lacks safe crossings. It lacks adequate lighting. Any STIP scenario that does not center the expansion of equity, accessibility, climate mitigation, and safety should be left in the 20th century where it belongs. And any STIP scenario that ignores those human imperatives to reroute money to the Rose Quarter expansion, a project that's lost the support of the city and the historically disenfranchised Black community it most directly affects, is a further insult to taxpayers. As a result of analysis from ODOT's Climate Office, it's clear the original non-highway scenario will do the most to address equity, climate, and safety. And while it's not enough, $321 million in multimodal funding is the minimum we must invest to build a 21st century transportation system. I urge you to support that original proposal and allocate at least the $321 million in non-highway spending. And before I go, I want to say thank you to Bike Loud, PDX, No More Freeways, the Sunrise Movement, and all the other activists who give up their afternoons, their nights, their weekends over and over and over and over and over again to fight for public good at legitimate personal sacrifice. In case it's not obvious to this body, being correct about the existential threat of climate change does not, in fact, protect one from climate change. We are all going down with this ship. At least some of us are doing what we can to try to bail it out.
Dan Mcfarlane is next. Is that correct?
Yep. Dan, you were unmuted.
Welcome, Dan.
Chair Van Brocklin. Yes. Chair Van Brocklin, my name is Dan Mcfarlane. I'm a director with AORTA, the Association of Oregon Rail and Transit Advocates, that's been working since 1976 for sensible transportation policy in Oregon. It was September 30, 1973. The C-130 touched down at Yasuka Navy Air Base. After a couple nights resetting my biological clock, I set out for Tokyo. It took over 90 minutes for the shuttle van to reach Tokyo, fighting for space on congested streets. 3 weeks later, I had visited Osaka, Nara, Hiroshima, Matsuyama, Takamatsu, and traveled on Japan's Shinkansen, or bullet train, at over 120 miles an hour, a primary objective of my trip. Like many Oregonians today, while in Japan, I lacked the access and the ability to drive, but I was mobile. On the return trip to the airbase, I used public transit, the local rail system. The trip was fast and comfortable, taking 20 rather than 90 minutes. Oregon does not have a transportation department. It has an agency expanding pavement, encouraging more congestion and more sprawl. Adding more pavement violates Governor Brown's executive order on climate change. Yes, we need roads and highways, but we do not have a shortage of asphalt. Oregon must lead our, OTC must lead our state to provide a comprehensive system of urban and intercity public transportation. In 2018, ODOT proved it could operate intercity bus service in the Columbia Gorge to ease congestion. Such operations are fundable using constitutionally restricted gasoline tax and registration fees. We need an equitable system for all Oregonians, reducing carbon emissions, allowing terrestrial space for people and productivity, not just to move and park single-occupant vehicles. The Shinkansen has been operating since 1964, today reaching speeds of 200 miles an hour. It has operated for over 55 years without a single crash-related fatality or injury, not one injury. I am not advocating building HSR today. We are far, far behind the rest of the world. There is no HR system in the world that exists without a comprehensive system of conventional rail and transit, frequent, reliable, interconnected. We do not have Vision Zero. Japan has Vision Zero. We have zero vision. OTC needs to begin providing vision, a non-highway option. Please begin to lead for all Oregonians. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So Brett?
Yep, and Brett, you are unmuted.
Chair Van Brocklin, can you hear me? Hello?
We can hear you.
We can hear you, Brett.
Okay, thank
Welcome.
you so much. Thank you. Chair Van Brocklin, members of the commission, thank you for this opportunity to present before you today and engage with you even though we're apart. My name is Brett Morgan. I work as the Metro Advocacy Manager for 1000 Friends of Oregon. We submitted a letter of comment that details all this in more length, and I encourage you to read that. But I wanted to also provide some verbal testimony that highlighted some of the concerns we had with the proposed SIP as we move forward. Firstly, as a land use organization, we're primarily concerned with goals 1, which is public engagement, and goals 12 of meeting the transportation needs of Oregonians. And so within that, we're concerned and see that the process that is unfolding right now as a result of many of the shortcomings of the public engagement process. In fact, when we reached out to ODOT and tried to understand the public engagement process for the SIP better and the 45-day comment period, many of the public kind of faced ridicule from ODOT staff, and there wasn't clear guidelines in what constituted the 45-day comment period as ODOT policies constituted. So it was a pretty frustrating experience. Moving on to the second component, though, that I wanted to highlight, and as many of the other folks have commented on in this meeting as well, a budget is a reflection of your moral priorities, and as OTC and ODOT move forward, and as someone who's young and 26 and works in the policy space, it is incredibly frustrating that I feel like I have to continue to work with and engage with my public agencies to acknowledge the climate reality that we're facing before us, and that we need to actively and considerably restructure the way we invest in our society in order to meet the climate crisis. And so I encourage you to read over our letter in more detail, but again, thank you for the opportunity to present, and we hope that the OTC and ODOT can work forward to create the future that all Oregonians need to thrive. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Brad. I appreciate your attending. So Michelle, I think that leaves us with Neil, Lyle, and Carrie.
So,
Who,
unfortunately, neither of them are on the line. So, with that being said, that is all I have for public comments this evening.
okay, thank you very much, Michelle. So that concludes the public oral testimony. We have, as I said, all of the written testimony that you've submitted. It's 6:25. I'm going to suggest a 5-minute break and reconvene at 6:30 to hear the staff report, and then the commission will have its deliberation on this subject. So I will see you all in 5 minutes. Okay, it's 6:30. Let's make sure the commission is here. I see Julie. Maurice, are you here? Not quite yet. Vice Chair Simpson? There's Maurice.
Yes, sir.
Hello? Orlando is here. Sharon?
I'm here.
Okay. So we are going to reconvene, and we'll turn it over to Jerry, Amanda, Karen, Jeff, and Travis.
Great. Thank you,
Travis?
Thank you, Chair Van Brockland, members of the Commission. For the record, my name is Travis Brower. I'm ODOT's Assistant Director for Revenue Finance and Compliance. In the interest of giving the Commission the maximum amount of time to deliberate, we're going to give a relatively brief staff report of about 10 minutes. Chair Van Brockland did ask me to respond to a few of the comments, particularly in response to some of the thoughts around the public comment process. It was noted that ODOT does have a public comment policy, and so I would like to ask Jerry Bohart if she could speak a little bit to how that applies to this STIP, and then I'll talk a little bit about the rest of the process and how we got to where we are today.
Good evening, Commissioners. For the record, my name is Jerry Bohart. I'm the Policy Data Analysis Division Administrator. So, Travis, thank you. So, you may recall that actually in October, you all approved an updated public involvement policy, and that really was reflective of some changes you made to some delegations between what your role is as a commission and what Director Strickler could approve. So as people were talking about the major and minor, that's the one of the differences. This policy is about plans and the STIP that you actually adopt. And as many of you who have been on the commission for a while, you know that we often come to you and we ask you to release the draft plan, the draft STIP for public involvement. So you all actually take an action to release something for public involvement, public participation, and that is when the 45-day clock starts. And also in that process, that's when we really use our area commissions and our advisory commissions, particularly in the STIP. They're the ones that hold a number of meetings with regards to input relative to the STIP. I realize that this is a major milestone, but the 45-day clock is really what comes out of federal regulations, and it's when we need to make sure we've followed that process with regards to federal highways and FTA making an approval. So I don't know if I need to go in much more. I think that you'll see Travis as he talks about all the work that we've done and the engagement that we've done in the last 5 months, that it really fulfills the policies that you have around public engagement and communication that exists in all of our modal plans, whether it's the Oregon Transportation Plan or our specific modal plans from highway to bike ped. So with that, I think, Travis, I'll turn it back to you unless there's any questions from the commission.
Questions to Jerry on the rule?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner
Yes.
Smith here.
Commissioner Smith.
Thank you. Thank you, Jerry. For clarity for our audience, because there seems to be a lot of concern about the official 45-day comment period. Can you explain when that happens and when that process will start?
So I don't have the STIP schedule in front of me, but probably about 2 years from now, we will bring a draft STIP to you that actually has identified all of the projects and all the things that will actually go into the STIP. We will actually ask your permission to release it for public comment. And usually in the time that we do that, we'll tell you that public comment starts on, July 1st, and it's going to run through September 15th, whatever the date may be. We also, if you've looked at the 21-24 STIP, you'll see, and I don't know if Jeff Flowers is on the call or not, but we have provided you all of the comments that came as part of that, and we typically also do a record of how we address those comments. And as I said, we usually, our area commissions on transportation are really the ones that are responsible for making sure they actually hold 1 or 2 public meetings to make sure they get comments specific to the draft STIP, and that's what's rolled up to you all before you take any actions on the final STIP.
Thank you, Jerry. I just wanted to be clear that for all of our folks listening, and so they understand, that formal process hasn't started yet.
Correct.
Chair Van Brockman, members of the commission.
Thank you, Jerry. Thank you, Commissioner Smith. Just before we leave Jerry, any other questions for Jerry? To make sure we're hearing from her since she's here to cover the this part of the process. These questions related to the process, and I know Travis has some comments too. So, other questions for Jerry? Okay, Travis.
Thank you, sir. So I would note that I'll be the first to admit we can always do better with public comment and public engagement, and we will certainly be learning the lessons from this STIP process. In particular, how we can present complicated information to the public about investments and their outcomes. This is the first time we have actually provided this level of detail, not just about the amount of funding that could go into different investment categories, but in using this tool that shows those outcomes. And so I think we have opportunities to learn how to do that better. But I would say that we engaged this overall effort in a spirit of significant public engagement. Starting 5 months ago, we had a survey that was taken by 800 Oregonians, over 200 people who participated in an online open house, more than a dozen advisory committees that were engaged, 2 webinars, hundreds of comments that were presented, as well as a monthly email update that went to something like 1,500 people each month. So we really did work to get that public engagement opportunities in. What that did was build a very substantial public comment record, which you have in front of you. First provided over 60 pages of documentation in September, followed by over 200 pages this last month in October. And so we have been able to, in December, we have been able to provide a lot of public comment opportunities that have built that record and have used that to help develop these scenarios and then make the adjustments to the scenarios as necessary. For generally, the public comment opportunities are to provide decision-making bodies insight from the public and then an opportunity to revise potential investment plans or scenarios based on those public comments. And that's exactly what we did in this situation. We had designed the hybrid scenarios in particular based on the public comment we received in a variety of these forums. In particular, when we did the online open house, the highest rated scenario was the non-highway and safety scenario. And so we took that scenario and recognized that there were also a lot of people who thought that it did not do enough for fix-it, as there was a lot of concern throughout this process in providing adequate funding to prevent the system from deteriorating. So we did some fairly minor modifications, shifted about 6% of funding in there from programs allocations over primarily into the fix-it program, and then presented you with those hybrid scenarios. So we view that as an opportunity really for the commission to listen to that public input and then try to incorporate that into the options that are coming back for your decision making. Of course, that is what decision-making bodies do, and you have now received public comment on that process, and I think that gives you a basis for moving forward tonight if you choose to make a decision on these. I will turn this discussion over now to Ms. Peets, our Climate Office Director, who will be walking you through the analysis of the 3 scenarios that the Commission directed us to look at the December 1st meeting. So Amanda, the floor is yours.
Great, thanks Travis. Good evening, Chair Van Brockman, members of the Commission. For the record, Amanda Peets, Director of ODOT's Climate Office. Michelle, if we can go to the next slide. So as Travis mentioned, based on the direction at the December 1st meeting, we went back and analyzed the 3 hybrid scenarios that were discussed there. So at the December 1st meeting, we debuted the results of hybrid 2A and 2B per commission direction. What you're seeing now is new results for hybrid 3B, which is a version of a hybrid that was presented previously, but dialed back some of the reductions to the Fix-It program and kind of spread that money out. So just as a refresher, this is the tool that the Climate Office developed for showing how the different distribution of funding might impact the outcomes of the strategic action plan and some key outcomes for the state. And the dark green boxes show where there's notable improvements to a particular outcome area. The light green where there's modest improvements. Where there's gray, it's pretty much the same as the baseline, so pretty consistent with past spending. Light red is a modest decline, and in other scenarios, we had showed a notable decline in certain areas. It's not shown in these scenarios. All scenarios are shown together in slide 8 of this slide deck, but again, we were asked to focus on these 3. So what you see from these 3 is that hybrid 2A focuses money on non-highway and enhanced. The increase to the enhanced funding kind of offsets the emission reductions for the climate side of things. So you see more significant improvement for congestion relief, and then some improvement for equity multimodal mobility. Hybrid 2B has some directionality for reducing greenhouse gas emissions that differs from the other scenario. A little bit less movement towards congestion relief, but still in a positive direction. Hybrid 3B takes more funding, as you can see from the Fix-It category. So Fix-It has $770 million as opposed to $805 in the other 2 scenarios. That results in some modest decline in conditions of the overall system, so state of good repair, as well as our ability to adapt to some of the changes posed by climate change. But fairly green in the other categories, showing some direction. So if we move to the next slide, so the color boxes just give a general sense of kind of order of magnitude of what direction are we heading on key outcomes. Those outcomes have real effects on the system. So I'll hit a few on, I think, the more positive side. Ms. Rowe will talk about some impacts to the state of good repair on the other side of that. So what the word I like to describe is directionality. So when you have a light green box that I just showed you, it's not necessarily making a significant improvement or towards a certain outcome area, but it does show some movement. The challenge is with any of the outcomes that we're trying to achieve, the needs far outpace available funding, and that's what that chart shows with the red on the right-hand side of this slide, is that the needs far outpace funding. But starting to fund some of these historically underfunded categories can help to make a difference in addressing some disparities and other issues that have occurred. Most scenarios of the hybrids have some funding for congestion relief as focused on the enhanced program. And most, except for one of the hybrid scenarios, shows some directionality towards reducing greenhouse gas emissions. If you look at the bottom of the slide, a good share of emissions, the majority by far come from how we invest in the transportation system. So decisions like this can really support how we move in the direction of our climate goals. And then this chart showing the gap is from our statewide transportation strategy, and we've shared that before to show that our vision for achieving statewide goals has around an 80% reduction out to the year 2050. We see some movement in this bright blue line between those hybrid scenarios in helping us to achieve that goal, but there's still a gap there, which would require additional investments plus other actions outside of the STIP. Next slide, please. We do have in all hybrid scenarios a historic increase in non-highway investments. So you can see the chart on the right-hand side showing the level that we've historically funded non-highway with, and so just as a reminder, non-highway is bicycle, pedestrian, public transportation, transportation demand management type strategies. And each of the hybrid scenarios have a significant increase in that. That does have real effects on the system. So you've heard through some public comments about the years to complete the biking and walking system. There's a number of significant gaps that exist in the system today. And we can reduce the time frame in which we need to complete that system. So in the hybrid scenarios, it can be reduced as much as around 60 years to complete the system as opposed to 150 in the baseline. Putting more money towards non-highway also allows for more strategic versus opportunistic investments. Traditionally, non-highway projects like adding a sidewalk or bike lane are done as part of a larger project because it's cost effective to do so. Adding more money to this category allows for more targeted investments for the highest need gaps and locations, and really sets aside that money to help address other outcome areas like equity, for example. Additional money to non-highway can help support our other goals such as climate, as we can focus money to electrifying the public transportation system, for example, to be lower emitting carbon. We'll move to the next slide, and then I'll transition to Karen Rowe.
Thanks, Amanda. Chair, Vice Chair, Commissioners, for the record, I'm Karen Rowe, Delivery and Operations Division Administrator. I know you have a tough choice in front of you tonight. I'm here to talk about the state of good repair and what we call the fix-it budget. So the fix-it budget accounts for many aspects of keeping our system in good repair: pavements, bridges, culverts, slide areas, operations such as ITS devices, such as cameras and variable message signs. The majority of the funding, though, is designated to bridges and pavement conditions. So this map visualizes the course we're on for our bridges in the next 20 years with scenarios 2A or 2B based on analysis done on the Rough Roads Ahead report in 2017. Last time I spoke about increased load restricted bridges. While this is a visual demonstration of how that could look, what this map assumes is that the green corridors are the priority corridors. Again, they're reduced from our current priority corridors, and we would prioritize our bridge repairs, replacements, and demonstrates the impacts then to the parts of the other system. The yellow dot bridges indicate the bridges that are in need of rehabilitation, like deck work or substructure work in the next 20 years that would not be addressed due to insufficient funding. They'll be operational, but will continue to deteriorate, and future repairs will be more expensive, just like delaying repairs on a leaky roof can lead to costly replacement of other things in your house. Overall, the map indicates the magnitude of what our bridge system could look like in the future. These load restrictions could increase the cost of goods and services that may therefore impact greenhouse gas emissions to transporting freight. If you were to say what does the 3B condition look like, it's very similar to this with a few more red areas. Next slide, please. This slide talks about pavements. Pavements are another major challenge to keep in good repair as we prioritize these funds. These graphics show funding scenarios. If we had more funding, such as the $220 million a year, that's what the line would look like, the green line there. This is how we could keep the roads in good condition. Then, with the blue line, we have the 21-24 STIP funding amounts over the next 20 years. The 2A and 2B scenarios would be the red line and would be shown here as what would look like for a good and fair and better repair for the pavements. We know that current funding levels at ODOT will have roadway conditions decline and will increase the amount of future work to keep the roads serviceable. The funding for scenario 3B would even be more severe. We don't have it shown here than either of the two scenarios shown. The House Bill 2017 funding received from the state have minimum amounts mandated to bridges and seismic repair and culverts. So pavement will receive a smaller portion of the fix-it funds in this scenario, and we don't know how that'll look. It is assumed that at that rate of 3B, ODOT will only be able to provide contractor paving projects on the interstates in US 97. Another consideration just to keep in mind is that ODOT is going through the budget reductions for our operations, and we will have consequences on the maintenance of low volume roads in addition to this impact, some of which these low volume roads are the only way into some communities. These scenarios are about trade-offs and the impacts of road and bridges. I know it's a tough one to make. I hope this information helps convey the challenge ODOT has to keep the roads and bridges in a state of good repair. Next slide. Hand it back to you, Travis.
So Chair Van Broecklyn, members of the commission, that concludes our staff presentation, and now we will turn it back to you to deliberate. Michelle, you may want to move to slide 2 as the slide that shows the outcomes of each of the scenarios with the funding levels as a place for the commission to have that in front of them as they discuss. Chair Van Broecklyn, you're muted, Bob.
As I was saying, what happens is I think others mute me, so stop doing that. No, not you. So I was saying thank you for the presentation, members of the panel. I thought it was good, and I appreciate your covering a lot of material in a short period of time. So before we move to this conversation the commission is going to have, I'd just open it to the commission members if there are questions on the presentation or other questions outside the presentation relevant to tonight's topic that you want to ask staff. So questions for staff. Okay. Well, let's move then to discussion of this phase of the STIP development, which has been mentioned is a early phase. There's a lot of work ahead. My understanding is and Travis confirm or deny this, that we don't get to really the final decision, which would occur after a lengthy comment period, 45 days plus, on the proposal once the pieces are put together, because at this point we don't even know what projects we're talking about in each of these categories. So we have a lot more detail to develop. My understanding is we finally get to that final question of approval of the STIP in 2023, I believe, or late 22, something like that. Is that correct?
Yes. You would have in front of you a draft STIP to put out for public comment early in 2023, and then you would have a public comment period of at least 45 days, and then likely in June or July of 2023, you would approve the draft STIP with any changes that come out of the public comment period, and then send it on to FHWA and the Federal Transit Administration for their final approval.
And all along the way, over that 3-year period, my understanding is that we can and in the past have made adjustments.
I don't want to diminish. And in fact, even beyond that period, you regularly make adjustments to the STIP when there are changes in federal funding or changes in state funding. There is usually about one major STIP update per cycle, given the vicissitudes of federal and state funding, where generally we have additional funding to meet additional needs.
Thank you. So I believe where we left off is at our meeting on December 1st, as we had reduced the scenarios that we wanted to consider for approval to those in front of you on this slide. So I first want to check and make sure that that's everyone's understanding, and that if someone wants to suggest we look at something more than these, that they have, this is the opportunity to add. But I think our goal, our purpose at the end of last meeting was to try and reduce the number to those that had the kind of most support. We have not seen this version of 3B, I think, exactly, but we had seen the other two. So is that correct? Any consternation about that wasn't what we did? Okay. So I think maybe the discussion ought to try to further narrow this to 2 choices, and then we could vote on 2. It's hard to vote on 3 with 5 people on a decision-making body. So that would be my suggestion, that maybe each of us declare among these 3, what our top choices were, and see if we can get to narrow this to 2 or even 1. But at least have a discussion that would move towards getting down to 2.
I agree.
How do people feel about that? That sound right? Okay, so I'll just open it for commissioners to comment on these 3 and which 2 they'd favor being the finalists among these 3 semifinalists.
I'll jump in, and I'll.
Mr. Vice Chair.
Suggest we focus on hybrid 2B and hybrid 3B, whether it's deciding on one of those or it's a combination of those for us to deliberate on and decide what is in the best interest of these categories. Do we need to change any? Do we need to leave them as is? Is one better than the other? What is the consensus here? If any, it doesn't matter. It's a process. There's 5 of us. All it takes is 3 to decide.
Hopefully we get to a consensus.
So that's just kind of what I was thinking.
Okay, others?
Mr. Chair, this is more Commissioner Henderson.
Commissioner Henderson, please.
I'm curious, and for the record, I am inclined to agree with Vice Chair Simpson on 2B and 3B as the places to start deliberation. I didn't get a chance to ask the question of Karen when she was presenting. I apologize, I didn't get unmuted quickly enough. On the in the slide presentation that she just shared that showed the rates of decline and rates of need under scenarios 2B and 2A and 2B, I'm just curious, is there a similar, as a refresher for me, I apologize if I've seen it before, if there is a graph that shows what scenario 2, since there was clearly a lot of public comment about the need for scenario 2. I'm just curious what the impact on roads and bridges are, what the impact on current system is, because as I go back and look at the data on public comment from the TNIS and the STIP survey and where people wanted to see those investments, I see that maintaining roads and bridges was pretty high on both surveys. Just wanted to get an understanding of what that impact looked like from the depiction, if there was a similar depiction.
So let's turn back to the panel on that. We can involve them on any questions we've got along the way here. So I guess I would turn that to Karen and Travis.
Okay.
The slide that is being referred to, I'm sure you're familiar with, is the dotted lines on the arc. Getting there, I think.
Yeah. So that one and the next one. I'm just curious if scenario 2 had a similar depiction.
The non-high, yeah, this is the one I was thinking of you describing. So, what do we have information about what that looks like if we went to the non-highway S2?
So, thank you, Chair Van Brockland, Vice Chair Commissioner Henderson. We do not have exact analysis on what that would look like for scenario 2. As you see, and I don't, to be honest, I'm not sure exactly the funding scenario with scenario 2, but as you see for the 21-24 STIP, it's about $100 million a year, and so that's the blue line. I think scenario 2 was similar baseline as 21-24. So it could be between the blue and the red lines. I'm not quite sure where it lands. Again, this is projected over 20 years. So these are analyses that we've been doing because we know we're in this state of decline with current funding. So we've just thrown our best guesses of what these scenarios would look like and the impact to the system based on the analysis that we've already done. So that's pretty similar with the bridges too. That's more of a, this is what it could look like. And we have run through some of this funding scenario in our documents called Rough Roads Ahead.
Mm-hmm. Commissioner Van Brocklin, Commissioner Henderson, the last go round we had scenario 2, which became scenario 2A. So both scenario 2A and 2B have a level of fix-it funding that is about $805 million, which is slightly less than the current STIP of about $850 million. You may recall that the scenario 1 hybrid that we brought to you 2 weeks ago had a slightly higher level of fix-it funding. So that line may have been a little bit higher than that 2A, 2B red dotted line here. But that does represent our best estimate on the long-term system pavement deterioration that we would see under either scenario 2A or 2B.
So I have a slide here from the presentation earlier earlier in our process. I think it was a December 1 slide that shows non-highway fix-it funding at 848. So these two are at 805, but move other money, have different allocations to other. So it would be about another 45 million for STIP. So that might put it slightly, I don't know where to put it. As you were saying, Karen, maybe somewhere between the two lines, the blue and the red. A little unclear.
It would be about there. It's hard to estimate exactly what it would be. These are general, like Travis said, estimations on what the impact is to our system with these fundings.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
So, Sharon, Julie?
Yeah, I'll go. Commissioner Smith here.
Yeah.
Maybe if we could go back to the scenarios slide, please. Thanks, Michelle. So I lean towards hybrid 2B and maybe some modification of 3B. My thinking hasn't really changed a whole lot from our last meeting. Just to summarize, I think we need to devote more money to non-highway for all the reasons that we've talked about, but I'm also very mindful of the need for good repair and fix-it. And I was persuaded that we need to have some money in enhanced to cover things like the toll project, which can go a long way to trying to, reduce a dependence on single occupancy vehicles. And we have to be able to fund that in order to implement it. So I think it's important to keep money in that category. I would be certainly open to looking at 3B, some tinkerings with it, or somewhere in between the 2B and 3B, I don't know. I'd be comfortable shifting some of the safety money. Well, I wouldn't want to go beyond 147 million. I think that's kind of our minimum. I'd be open to shifting a little bit of fix-it to non-highway, but I'm really concerned that if we delay fix-it, it's just going to cost more money in the long run, and so I'm not real comfortable with that. But open to other perspectives.
Commissioner, thank you, Commissioner Smith. Commissioner Brown?
So I echo my fellow commissioners. I'm leaning towards 2B or 3B, but looking at just fix at our original ideas, you know, it's up 14%. Is there any wiggle room between that 5% reduction in 2B? Possibly. We could go with a bigger reduction and put a little bit more towards safety, because safety is kind of left out at this point, and is kept flat. But I mean, this is just difficult. It makes me angry that we're having to make these kind of decisions, and not being able to really look at other additional funding that could come in to change this. And I think that whatever decision we make, the commission is really going to have to step it up and talk with our legislators and also with our federal partners to really shore up funding. We can't continue doing this. Transit did it for years. They finally got their STIF dollars, and they were able to unbury themselves some. But again, 2B, 3B are my choice.
Okay.
Open to modification.
Well, then let's have our conversation be about those two options. I'm not hearing anything with respect to 2A, and I tend to. Yes.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
But you were going to stop. Chair, I was going to say I actually like Sharon's recommendation in terms of let's not go below 147. So if we modify that number, and again, I'm just putting this on the table, from the 3B, where would be the next place that we felt comfortable the group placing that 10?
Alonzo, could you? I'm not tracking with you for some reason. I guess I don't think Sharon said she wanted to see us reduce safety.
I think Alanda was saying take 2B's safety up
below 147.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is on 3B, it's at 157. We could go back, take that 10 down to 147, and then the question on the table is where does the commission believe that we should move those resources?
You're talking about 3B. If we move 3B down to 147, where would we put it? Well, I'll just make a couple of comments that I think are reflective of what we're all thinking. We have a number of things going on here. The first thing is we have a lot of needs. We have a lot of deferred maintenance. We just have a lot of need in the state for infrastructure, transportation investment. And we don't have the resources to do all of it. And just so the public understands, some of it comes from mandates out of House Bill 2017. We are mandated to build the Rose Quarter project by the state legislature and the governor. I don't think that's well understood, but it's in the statute. And we have about $450 million for that project that is funded in that bill. But we had a cost estimate in January which said the project in January would cost $750 million roughly. So that's a $300 million increase since it was approved in 2017, and it goes back to the way the cost was estimated in 2017, which, for example, didn't take into account inflation. So big cost differential. So that project Rose Quarter is $300 million underwater right now. So there's $300 million to find to do that project, assuming it's $750 and not more. We have mandated to seismically upgrade and rebuild the Abernathy Bridge and expand it from 4 to 6 lanes because it's a bottleneck on I-205. That's going to be several hundred millions of dollars. There is no money in House Bill 2017 for that other than tolling. So tolling becomes a big part of the solution to being able to do that project and the climbing lanes on the auxiliary lanes on I-205, but we don't. So then you turn to tolling. Another mandated project. These are all required I listened to the public talk about our discretion. We don't have discretion. We're implementing those decisions. They're directives from the state legislation. On tolling, we can set up tolling, but there's no funding in House Bill 2017 to set it up. And that is no small task. That's several hundred millions of dollars. So tolling and those big projects in the interstate system in the Portland region, not even addressed by House Bill 2017 because it fell outside of it, is then a fourth major project, which is the Columbia River Bridge on I-5 between Oregon and Washington, and there are discussions on that. We heard an estimate in the last meeting that that would be a project somewhere between 3.2 and 4.8 billion dollars. So that's just that. Then we have the Executive Order 2004, which calls for investments in electrification, and it also calls for developing a lens, as Amanda's office is working on, to get at what are the GHG implications of our STIP projects. Then we have seismic, which in part is addressed by Fix-It, but we have to keep these road systems throughout the state in good repair in case we get the Cascadia event, which is out there. And at that point, if it's devastating enough, 97 becomes the major north-south system in the state, because the assumption is it'll be less harm than I-5. So we're trying to piecemeal together funding for that. And then, you know, the state of good repair generally, as I just mentioned. And finally, operating the agency itself, which is funded out of these transportation revenue sources. It's not funded out of the general fund. We are not a general fund agency. ODOT is funded out of the transportation fees and taxes we have. So the bottom line is we have a lot that we have to do. Some of it we're required to do under law. Some of it I didn't mention the court order on the curb ramps, which we're spending hundreds of millions of dollars on. So the courts, the legislature, and the governor's executive order are all placing obligations on the agency to build all of these things or manage all of these things. And as Julie said so succinctly, we just don't have the money. And so this chart that is in front of us right now is an example. You just look down the left side of the page, there are all these things for us to do. And all those things I just mentioned are within these boxes. And it's not we can't, the reason that I've been looking for, and why I asked for 2B, is I'm looking for a way to balance and do no harm to any one box and try and make progress in as many places as possible. So it's a real balancing act, and it's very challenging. And the problem, frankly, is we just don't have the resources. So, you know, we can play with moving a little around here, but I think from the discussions I've had on this, my own understanding is that 2B is about as close as we can get without tipping something red by trying to make something else green or greener. So maybe that's my question to staff, Travis and Amanda. Is that true? How much wiggle room do we have without creating a challenge somewhere? In other words, what is the best mix to do the least harm?
Chair Van Brockman, I think it's important to note that you know, this model that the Climate Office built is a decision-making tool, but it really can't stand in place of the Commission's independent judgment. That said, when we did this analysis, and Amanda can give you further detail, really any amount of funding less than about $805 million for Fix-It did tip it into some sort of decline, which is obviously in any of these scenarios, as Karen described, we're going to see a slight decline in the condition of the system, the state of good repair of our roads and bridges. Yet any further reduction from 805 does tip you into that modest decline category.
And what about the other three? Well, let's not talk about enhanced right now. What about, I mean, non-highway, we're in understanding in 2B for a second, so we focus in on something. That's a increase over the 2021-2024 STIP, if I do the math right, of $87 million. So I think there we're being very responsive and saying ourselves as a commission, we're investing, we want to invest more in non-highway. So I assume, so I want to get to Vice Chair's question. If I was going to do any putzing around with 2B, I would probably, like move $5 million out of enhance and put it in safety. If I was going to do any putzing around with 3B, I would take the 10 million in safety to get it to 147 and probably split it into two $5 million increments, one to fix it and one to non-highway. So it'd be 775, 70, 275, 147. But I think we're at that level of tweaking. I don't think we can move 20 million around or 30 million around without messing up our goal here, trying to do what we can without it's still moving all of these things forward because we're required to move a lot of them forward.
I think that would probably at least be a starting point for us to conversate on and see where it goes from there. But I would like to echo, and I can confirm with Travis that I asked at the last meeting we had. In my experience, these things change based on the situation that's at hand, the need, the circumstance. Travis, can you confirm that just so others, I guess, understand and have clarity? We don't know what the feds are going to do. We don't know about the situations and circumstances that are going to play itself as it pertains to tolling. We don't know if the legislature is going to adopt a new bill. I mean, we're not stuck with these numbers forever, right? If the commission decides that they feel the need to move resources in order to address the need at hand.
Vice Chair Simpson, you're correct. You've identified a number of risks and uncertainties. What we've done in the past with the commission, or what the commission has done in the past, is when additional money has come in, you have allocated it to areas that show additional need, perhaps areas where you feel like you've not allocated enough in the STIP, or where we know we have a need. We, to my knowledge, have not really gone back in after approval of the draft STIP or the funding allocation and shifted funding from one area, reduced that into another area. It's generally been when more money has been made available, we add it to an area so that it's not a zero-sum game.
But are you saying that the commission could not amend it if they felt the need to do it, or are you saying that they still have the authority to do that?
Vice Chair, you absolutely have the authority to do that. The caution I would give you is that we will begin the project selection process and also the scoping and project development process. So certainly you'd have to be cognizant of the cost that we've sunk into various projects at the time you made that decision. But absolutely, the commission can make that determination at any point in the STIP process to move funding from one category to another.
I guess I'd just say one more thing. I think that for me, even at 805 under scenario 2B, the state of repair is experiencing a small decline. There are challenges all over the state, and I think we have to take a statewide perspective. So I'm reluctant to support a scenario plan that takes STIP out of, fix it out of the white or green into the red. And that's my biggest concern with 3B, is that that box in the corner the bottom of the column under 3B, which says conditions start to more rapidly decline. I feel like 805 is about as low as we can go there. So that's my biggest concern with 3B.
This is Commissioner Smith. I agree with you, Chair. I'm most comfortable with 2B, but I also, I want to be open and, willing to compromise and make adjustments if people feel very strongly about it. So.
Yeah, I hear you.
Mr. Chair, this is
Commissioner Henderson.
Just wanted to, first of all, thank you for the reminder, especially for me as a new commissioner. It's always good to have a reminder of the mandates that have been given to ODOT and to the OTC to deliberate and think through, particularly those that are of the unfunded nature, as Commissioner Brown articulated. I was thinking through some of the comments that were made this evening, and having read a few of them for the past couple of days, and appreciated, I think it was Rob's comments about looking at what the Massachusetts DOT was doing and their toolkit, etc. And it reminded me of the work that different Governor Tim Kaine at the time in Virginia, when I was working for him, controversies around the tunneling project and eventually the hot lanes. And to Commissioner Simpson's comments, one of the things that I've been thinking about is the tolling and RUC work that ODOT's been doing over the last couple of years. There's tremendous opportunity if we look at what tolling can do. In Virginia, I believe an original investment in the hot lanes was around 1.4 billion over the course of the project, and they've seen returns of upwards of 12 and 14% above that in revenue on a yearly basis since those hot lanes have been put into place. So I think with some strategic investment now, and making sure that we buttress the system as best we can, given the challenges that we face. And I too share Commissioner Smith's feelings about hybrid 2B, as I think I stated in the last meeting. I think we have some other opportunities as we move forward, because the STIP, as you mentioned earlier, we will have a final vote or see a final projection in 2023. So as a is where I am leaning.
Well, I certainly agree with you on the revenue side, and with the Vice Chair and others' comments on that. We have got to focus on, obviously we have to stand up tolling. We literally have to, we're required to, but we have to get some additional funding in order to do it. But I think RUC is another big opportunity for the state, and it's just going to require us to work on these sources that we have some control over. We have quite a bit of control with respect to tolling, because it's been given to us, other than we don't have the money to set it up. But I'm optimistic about that. The RUC is a longer road, no pun intended. Julie, it worries me when you're quiet this long.
It should.
Touche, my friend.
I have been sitting here and thinking back to 2017, and really conversations 2014, 2017. When we were going to the legislature and we were asking for additional funding for all of these different areas, modes, and I was thinking about, okay, if we went with 3B and we had to go back to the legislature and we start this conversation saying, we're going to have to decline, our roads are going to decline so rapidly that we're going to have huge problems. We need to address this immediately. It's going to be a really hard conversation because of HB 2017. What's going to be an easy, I think, and this is just my personal belief, is the conversation around climate change and the governor's executive order. I think that gives us a starting point to be able to start some of this conversation and get some push behind it. Now, with that said, it's going to make a lot of people unhappy if we go with 2B. But I feel strongly that that's where I'm going to land on this, and that it's because I have a duty also to not just this piece of it. And I don't know. That's just where I'm at. I'm going to be quiet, and you can be scared.
Chair, I think you should call it.
Okay, do I have a motion? Commissioner Smith.
Mr. Chair, I move approval of forwarding hybrid 2B forward.
Is there a second?
As our STIP.
STIP allocation decision.
Second.
And I'll second that. Oh, go ahead. I think that was Maurice.
Sorry.
Commissioner Henderson seconded. Is there discussion on the motion? And I'll just make one comment further, which is this. This is a to be continued discussion, obviously, because we have to do not the allocation so much as we have to get more money in the system. You know, we need to have more money throughout these. These are all important things to do. We have to get more money in the system to do them, and if we get more money, then the pressure starts to alleviate itself, because a lot of the investments we're making on the infrastructure side, like tolling and like some of the things that Commissioner Henderson was just talking about, can lead to a better situation vis-a-vis climate and some of the other values that we're trying to pursue here. So I do think there's synergy around this, but there's not synergy around this taking a step from 2.4 billion to 2.2 billion. That is not going in the right direction. All right, any other comment?
I'll add one last comment. I'm probably going to be the odd one out here, and that's totally fine. I just want people to understand that this is natural and this is okay. But I definitely think today definitely opened up a new door for ODOT. It opened up a new door for the state of Oregon in terms of how we really value, how we invest, and how we perceive the transportation system and its impact on people's lives in the broader community. But I'm actually humbled that we are going down this path, and I think it's very normal, natural, and necessary that not everybody is always going to see everything eye to eye, but as long as we can have consensus, we can always get to the light of day at the end.
So is there anything that we might do to 2B that would bring you over the line with us?
I think it's optics at this point. I think I trust you guys, and I trust you're my colleagues. I trust your expertise and your experience in this realm of work, and I'm gonna walk along with you on this. I'm gonna have a different voting outcome.
So I have a question, if I can ask Vice Chair Simpson, what would be your preferred option?
My preferred option was to actually, now that I started looking at it, would be to bring down 2B from 805 to 795 and put that into non-highway.
So is that a
just
friendly?
so I understand, you're suggesting that it go to 795 and that non-highway would go to 255.
Yeah, and its only premise of that is since we have no concrete explicit definition as to how we got to the algorithm of how we color code these categories, it's just moving dollars around to me based on where you feel comfortable.
So Mr. Vice Chair, how would you feel about these numbers in the 2B column? 800, 65, 255, 147.
$865 and the 250. I think that could work.
255. I would like to keep STIP at least, or pardon me, I keep saying this, fix it at least 800, because I think about the fires, I think about the earthquake, I just think about all kinds of things that require us to have a functioning highway system.
Yeah.
Statewide. I know
I
it's
agree with those comments.
It's self-preservation, right? We're preserving what we have there, which has always been a high priority in Oregon. I think going back to when they did the listening posts in 2016 between sessions, and Tanny and Greg Cantor went out at that committee and went around the state, and they said, two big problems. Got to make sure you invest in the system, preservation, and you've got to deal with Portland congestion because it's affecting every county in the state economically. What's happening in Portland? I think
the fact that we are decades out from making any investments into this particular part of the state is showing why we're in such a dire state right now in terms of how people perceive investments and the impacts it's having on the region, and more importantly, how the impacts in that region are affecting other parts of the state.
So, Commissioner Smith, would you entertain a friendly amendment to your motion to 865?
Absolutely.
255, 147. Everybody have those numbers? 800.
I got to check with Julie first, though.
Yeah, where's Julie? That's the big question.
I'm right here. I'm right here with you. I can go along with the group on it. I just really worry, and the reason I don't necessarily want to go with non-highway with more money is I think that there's a lot of money that's coming into transit already, and I don't know how that falls into the algorithm right now of non-highway and what's being done. So I can live with it if the rest of the commission wants to do it.
Mr. Henderson.
Commissioner Henderson.
Thank you. So I'm amenable to making these slight changes. I'll go back to a comment I think that you made, Vice Chair, and that I believe Travis confirmed that if additional dollars are identified, we have the opportunity to sort of backfill some of the areas where that we determine have greatest need. So to Commissioner Brown's comment, when I think about fix it, I think in my first meeting I talked about my concerns about climate fires, and so I certainly see the need to preserve the system as is. Obviously, in my day job, I spend a lot of time in the safety and non-highway space, so I also want to see those enhancements made as well. And so those would certainly be the two areas where, if additional dollars become available, I would be putting money towards non-highway, but also towards fix it to preserve the system, because otherwise the non-highway investments, if the system is deteriorating, aren't going to be worth anything to us, or not as much anyway, I should say.
So do we dare ask Travis what he thinks of that? Or do we just go?
I don't think we want to put Travis on the spot unless he's dying to speak.
Commissioners, the only thing I would note is we are in fact going to have a conversation with you next month after this conversation is complete about where you feel like this allocation has underinvested, so that any federal funds that might come in over and above the amount that we have built into this allocation could be planned for those areas.
That would be great.
Assuming if we get to January and we decide we want to move 5 or 10 million around, it's going to be okay.
Mr. Chair, absolutely.
Okay, so we have a mulligan here. If we miss it slightly, we can fix it. No pun intended. Okay, so the revised motion, Commissioner Smith, would you state it?
Yes, I move approval of a STIP with the funding allocation hybrid 2B modified so that Fix-It is at 800, Enhance is at 65, non-highways at 255, and Safety is at 147.
Vice Chair Simpson, do you second?
Second.
Further discussion? Okay, I'll do a roll call vote. Vice Chair Simpson.
Aye.
Commissioner Smith.
Aye.
Commissioner Brown.
Aye.
Commissioner Henderson.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Thank you all for your efforts and your thoughtful conversation. And thank all of the people who came and spoke today and wrote to us. We are concerned about the issues you've raised, and we understand. We understand they're out there. We have to find more resources. Any other business before the commission tonight? Any other topic that anyone wants to raise? Okay. Thank you very much. Oh, Commissioner Smith.
I just wanted to say happy holidays to everyone, and stay safe and healthy, and we will all see you next year, and hopefully 2021 will be a little easier.
Hopefully. I share those sentiments on all points. So have a great rest of the week and a great rest of December, and hope you all get a little time to relax.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You too.
Good night. We are adjourned.
Good night.
Good night.